Hi there, my name is Angela, or Joy, or whatever you want to call me, and today I'm here to talk about the books I read in April, in May and in June. So I read a total of 10 books in these 3 months. So I used to read a lot more books in the past, but recently I've just wanted to focus on high quality books and just finding more joy again in reading and reading slowly and not putting so much pressure on myself anymore that I need to read 100 books a year. So I read 10 books in 3 months. I think let's just get into it right away. So starting with April. In April I read a total of 2 books, starting with Air of Fire from Sarah J Maas. Well, yesterday when I sat down to write some notes for this video, I had a moment where I had no idea what to say about this book because it's such a long series. Honestly, everything is just blending together and it's one whole journey. But if you don't know what this is about, which you probably do, but it's about Celaena Sardothien, which is an assassin in this continent named Aurelia. She's not only an assassin, but she's the assassin of the whole continent. Over the last 10 or so years, the dark side has taken over the continent, and we're basically following Celaena as she is slowly kind of getting entangled with the bad side, the Empire. I don't feel like I'm doing a good job at describing books without spoiling them, because recently I've wanted to recommend a book to my brother, and honestly I didn't even spoil it that hard. I was just telling him the basics, but he was like, oh well, now I already know that it's an enemies to lovers, and I basically already know what's going to happen. And it's so true, and I think it takes a lot of this suspense if I tell too much about a book. In this book we're following Celaena as she explores another continent, as she gets to know some more characters and also basically forming new bonds with other people. I must say though that the bonding with other people, with especially one person, it just is a little bit slower. She does take a lot of time building this new relationship, which is fine, but also for me, it was a little bit slow in the beginning, and that is something that I realized with Sarah J Maas books, that the first 60% of the book is rather slow, and then in the last 20%, 30-40%, it really starts to pick up and get exciting again. Then you want to read the next book again. The early part is always, for me anyway, a bit boring, to be honest. So the ending of the book always hits different, but I just would love to have more of an even pacing throughout the book and not have the beginning to be so slow and then the ending is always so good and so action-packed. One thing I really do like about Sarah J Maas' writing is that she does some really great world building, because as we're following Celaena and other characters, we get to know really the whole continent. So I think she really just has some great world building going on. Also, I always love if there's a map of the continent. That always helps so much, especially in the beginning, when you don't really know what's going on yet. But I still liked it, and back then I gave it 4 stars, which does feel a little bit unjustified now, because if you compare it to other 4 stars, I don't think it is a 4 stars. Especially because a 4 stars for me usually is a book that screams amazing, I loved it, it just doesn't feel right, but I will leave it at 4 stars, because back then I felt that way. Probably because the ending again was so good. So that is Air of Fire. Coming next, the last book I read in April is Queen of Shadows, again from Sarah J Maas. Until yesterday I forgot to log this book in my Goodreads and did my Storygraph, so I have no review from back then when I rated it. I think it was interesting. Honestly, I can't really remember much. Like I said, it just blends together because it's a whole long story. She will fight for her cousin, a warrior prepared to die for her. That scene, that was amazing. I loved it. I think I'll just give it a 3.5 stars, because that is a good rating between good and amazing. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that, but I really can't say too much about it. Then in May I read 2 books, and don't worry, it will pick up from here. So for the first one being Yona of the Dawn, which is a story about a very cute princess that is forced to flee from her palace because something terrible happens. And she is accompanied by her guard, Huck. He's amazing. And And we follow her as she's like growing into this strong, into this bold woman, and as she's meeting like some very funny, wholesome characters. And this is already the edition number 41, so I'm already quite deep in it. And I just love the characters so much. It gives found family and it has such a wholesome vibe, and I just love her character development. I just wish that the editions would come out a little bit faster. When I was beginning with the series, there were already quite a lot of volumes out there, and I just read it through so quickly, and I was just so deep in it. But now, you know, you have to wait always a few months before the next one comes out, so that is unfortunate, but it is a joy every single time. And this is definitely a 5-star read, no doubt at all. And the next book I read is Go as a River from Shelley Reed. This is the German edition, but I remember when I picked this up in a bookstore, it was in the recommended section, you know, where employees of the bookstore can recommend books and write these little sweet notes. I was so captivated by the cover of this book because it is just so stunning. So this book is set in Colorado in the 1940s. And we're following a young woman who is living on a peach farm with her father and her younger brother. And one day, as she's going into the city, she's meeting this young Native American boy. And from there, I remember I was thinking this is going to be the most beautiful love story like I ever read, because it just set such a beautiful tone to go in that direction. But it is really so much more than that. It turned and twisted. I went through heartbreak. It was painful. It was shattering. So really this is a story about excruciating loss and pain, and then coming to terms with what happened in the past. So this book is really a wild ride, and it's a great coming-of-age story. And something that I also really loved is that she's so connected to nature and her peach trees. That is something she really cares about, and really just loved how the author did such a good job to describe the scene around, to describe nature. And I really had a vivid picture in my mind of how it looks there, and I don't know, I think the nature descriptions were just beyond. So again, with this book you really don't know where it's going at first, and I really did enjoy it. It started so great, I must say. The middle part was a little bit slower. I had a time where I was like, okay, now it's like coming a little bit down, but as it then progresses again, it slowly picks up the pace, and I think you really just start to care about the woman, care about what's going to happen in the future. So Shelley Reed really takes you onto a healing journey with this woman, and it is such a beautiful thing. I would just have loved the ending to be a little bit more, like a little bit longer, and to show us what's going to happen. Because I'm a person, I don't really like open endings, because of course, I mean, you can imagine your own happy ending, but then you never really know for sure. And I would much prefer to know the happy ending, to really know what's going to happen. There are so many possibilities how it could have ended. I always prefer when it's just written out and I don't have to imagine my own ending. This book received a 4.75 stars from me. Like I said again, the middle was a little bit slower, but I just loved how she depicted the whole scene so beautifully, and you really were rooting for her journey, for her healing journey. So I really recommend this one. Now coming on to June, where my reading number definitely increased a lot. So in June I read a total of 6 books, starting with �Ｓpy Family. Unfortunately, I only have the cover for it because my brother has borrowed it. What can I say about �Ｓpy Family? Honestly, if you don't know �Ｓpy Family, what are you doing? But in general, if you don't know, this is about a spy that is basically has the mission of keeping those 2 continents, Oceania and Vestalis and Oceania. I think it's 𝑺𝑶𝑪𝑰ℎ, at peace, and we follow him as he is on this very secret mission where he is supposed to infiltrate this high up political, very important person on a personal level. And to make this possible, he is supposed to get a wife and get a kid. But what he doesn't know is that the wife is a serial killer and the child can read thoughts. And of course they're all trying to keep it secret from each other. This is just such, always, like every single volume is so hilarious, and I am honestly not easily humored by a book. I am not easily humored in general, to be honest. So, but this always does it for me, always. Every single volume, it's so funny. And as the story progresses, you just really start to care about the characters more and more, and it turns into such a heartwarming and action-packed, funny manga. And especially this volume was a lot more action-packed, which I loved, and I can't recommend this enough. If you don't like reading manga, please try this one. It is, I think it is my favorite, even more than 𝑦𝑗 of the Dawn. No, you can't really compare them. Forget what I said. This is one of my favorites, up on top with 𝑦𝑗 of the Dawn. So, highly recommend. Now the next two books I started in April but finished them in June, and I think that is why I read so little in April. But I read the next two books of the Front of Glass series, which is Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. I want to review them together because I read them together. If you don't know, with Front of Glass, with those two books you can do a tandem read. So there is an awesome guy out there who figured out which chapter to read and when to start the next one for the next book, so that you don't spoil anything for yourself and that it stays engaging and fun. I was very torn about doing a tandem read because it is the first time I read this series, and on Book Talk most people said read them together, do a tandem read, and on Reddit people, like almost everyone, said don't do a tandem read because Sarah J. Maas knows what she's doing. She published them like this for a reason. So now that I did the tandem read, I can honestly say, if you want to read them together, I wouldn't recommend it. Honestly, for me, it didn't really work out because they're just such different books. And I think 3 times throughout doing the tandem read, I was contemplating just reading them separately. But I pushed through because I thought, no, I already started it and I will finish them like this. I know that the people who love the tandem read recommend it because Tower of Dawn book is a lot slower and the Empire of Storms is very fast-paced and very so action-packed. They're on 2 different continents and follow different people. Empire of Storms ends on a huge cliffhanger. So I do understand that some people like the idea of reading them together, one slow book and one fast-paced book, to make it more of a fast-paced book. For me, that really destroyed the reading experience for both. Because I remember when I was reading Empire of Storms, I was so excited for every single chapter. But then it was time to go to Tower of Dawn and I was like, oh, this is so slow and it's just a whole different story. Each story has its strengths on their own. This one is a fast-paced book, very action-packed, and therefore you can just fly through this book. And this book is more of a world building, new characters, new world, a little bit of a slower book, but also very interesting. So it isn't I didn't find it boring, and I know that I would have enjoyed both books way more if I had read them separately and just enjoyed them for what they are and not trying to force them together into one big book. So I gave Empire of Storms a 4.5 stars, which is a very high rating. And although I did read them together, I was always looking forward to read this book because it's just so fast-paced and so action-packed, and I really love how the characters are just growing more and more together. Also gives kind of the found family trope. And I gave Tower of Dawn a 3.5 stars, and I just know I would have loved this way more if I've read it alone, on my own. No other book in between. Next 2 books I read or rather listened to as an audiobook were Save You and Save Us by Mona Carsten. I was really inspired to listen to the books because I read the book, the first one, and I also watched the series. And I really loved the series and I was curious how it will continue, because after reading the book I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue, but I really liked the series. If you don't know, we are following Ruby, which is a young girl who is going to a very prestigious school called Maxton Hall, and she is very determined to get to Oxford University. She's a very eager student, and she wants to stay as invisible as possible so that nothing comes in between her and Oxford. And one day, through an unfortunate event, she meets James. Yeah, she meets James, and from there on, a story with him builds. I didn't really take the book too seriously, first of all because I listened to in an audiobook form. When I'm listening to an audiobook, I'm always doing something else. Either I'm doing chores or driving with the car or walking. And for me, I always listen to audiobooks that are not too deep, where I don't need so much brain power, where I don't have to concentrate so much. I just took it for what it was. It wasn't amazing. It was just like a fluffy love story, nothing too deep. And I didn't even want to criticize it too much because it is a young adult book. As we all know, young people sometimes just don't know better, and we all make mistakes, especially when we're young. So I didn't really think about it too deeply, but just took it for what it was. So the books were enjoyable, nothing groundbreaking, but I did like the second book more than the third one, because the third one, the last one, was a little bit all over the place, and I didn't find myself caring so much anymore about listening to the audiobook. So I gave the second book 3.5 stars, which is actually quite high. And the second book, the third book, I gave 2.5 stars. It was my favorite. So, and now we come to I think the longest book I've ever read. Kingdom of Ash from Sarah J. Maas. This book has 980 pages, and I must say that it could have been way shorter, and it could have been so much more interesting. I'm so happy that I'm finally finished with the series. So this book takes us where at least I always expected, I think everyone expected that we end up here. And that is something, it doesn't happen like this with other books, that you know exactly where you're going. As soon as we get one information about Celaena Sardothien, we basically know where the series is going and where she will end up. The only thing we don't know is how she ends up here. And I just think this whole series was unnecessarily long. Although some books were really interesting, especially always in the ending, I think every book could have cut out some 100 pages because it just wasn't that interesting. And especially this book had so many parts that were so slow and so boring, and I really had to fight myself through this book day after day after day, reading a few pages every single day, and this one took me quite a long while to read. There must have been a way to sum this up and make the reading experience more pleasurable. Found the ending, didn't find it good, to be honest. It was very unspectacular. It didn't blow my socks off. And it's so sad because I spent so much time reading this series, and because we already know where we're going to end up. For that, I think it could have been more interesting, as an exchange, because we already know where we end up. So you see, I feel very strong about this because I spent so much time. It wasn't bad, but it also wasn't very good. In this book, I just loathed how a few characters got just killed off, especially one character. I was so mad. It felt very cheap, just killing this character off just like that. Some characters said some very unforgiving words. Multiple characters actually said some unforgiving words, but as soon as the other one is a danger, they are realizing what they did wrong, and they are so sorry, and now everything is fine again, and this person finally realizes that this is the love of your life. I don't know, it felt just more like, she wants to be bedded so bad. I feel a bit sorry. You are annoying. She's so annoying. She never wants to cuddle, but when I don't have time, she does. It's a mystery. Now, continuing. What I can say, what I didn't like about the writing throughout the whole series, but especially in this book, we have so many different POVs, and you sometimes don't know which POV you're reading because we don't get a headline of who is talking, which perspective we're reading, and the writing for each of them is quite similar. So sometimes I found myself reading one perspective and then it's going on to the next one, but I think I'm still reading the same one, and then there were some very confusing situations where I was like, wait, this is not the same person. So I think that could have been done a little bit better to make the characters more distinguishable from each other, or like to at least have a headline so that we know who we're reading about. And also in this book, but also already in Empire of Storms, I kind of lost my joy for some of the characters because I didn't vibe with them anymore. I think I can't say which character because then you already know that he's not dead. So I will not say the character name. It was just sad to see how some characters acted out of character and how different they were from the first few books compared to this one. Of course it makes sense because characters grow, but it honestly felt a little bit like a downgrade. Something I did enjoy, however, is that everything came to a close, how all the characters came together as one, and now I'm just very happy that it's over. I mean, it wasn't so bad, but it also wasn't very good. I'm quite disappointed because it could have been much better, especially the ending, the finale. It wasn't great, it wasn't exciting, and I think I'll give this book 2.5 stars. The series overall, I think I would give like 3 stars, which means good. Because it is interesting sometimes, it can be exciting at the end of the book always, but I find the first books way more interesting and way more packed and way more, I don't know, enjoyable. But I don't even want to speak about it too much anymore because almost the whole video was Sarah J. Maas books, and I am so done. So happy that I'm done. And I look very much forward to reading more books that require brain power and are a bit more enjoyable. So that was everything I read the last 3 months. Let me know what you're currently reading. The next video, my next book wrap-up, will definitely not contain Sarah J. Maas books, and I can't wait to share with you more brain power books in the next video. But always enjoy talking about books, and I hope you also enjoyed this video. I'll see you very soon again.